What if the reason you feel invisible is because you've been taught to dim the very light that was meant to make you unforgettable? They told you to be sweet, not strong, to be agreeable, not assertive, to play small so others wouldn't feel threatened. But deep down, there's a fire in you that refuses to go out, a voice that whispers, "There's more to me than this." This isn't just another feel-good message. This is your awakening, a deep dive into the parts of yourself you've been told to hide: the untamed, the fierce, the divine. Rooted in Carl Jung's teachings and the ancient wisdom of feminine archetypes, this is where you remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. This isn't just motivation. It's a blueprint to become untouchable. Stay with this until the end. What you'll discover might just change how you see yourself forever. There was a girl once, maybe a girl like you. She was smart, kind, and always did what was expected. She got the grades. She smiled politely. She never raised her voice. Every time she felt anger, she swallowed it. Every time she felt desire, she hid it. Every time she disagreed, she smiled instead. She learned early on that being good meant being small. Being loved meant being quiet. Being accepted meant being agreeable. So she buried her edge, her truth, her wildness. She buried her instincts, her curiosity, her fire. Not because she was weak, but because the world taught her that her power was a threat. Years passed. She didn't even realize how much of herself was gone. She just felt empty. Like she was performing a version of herself, but never really being her. Not fully, not freely. Maybe you know that feeling, that ache you can't explain, that sense that something's missing and that something might actually be you. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of you that have been pushed down, rejected, or deemed unacceptable by the outside world. It's the anger you were told wasn't ladylike. The sexuality you were told was shameful. The ambition you were told was selfish. The shadow isn't evil, it's just the parts of you that never got to breathe. And here's the truth no one told you growing up. The parts you've been taught to hide are often your greatest source of power. Think about that. All the emotions you were told to control, all the dreams you were told to tone down, all the strength you were told was too much. They were never flaws. They were signals, clues to your truth, pointers to the woman you were meant to become. You felt it, haven't you? That quiet rage under the smile, that hunger you keep swallowing, that fire behind your eyes when someone tries to shrink you again. That is not weakness. That is not madness. That is not you being too much. That is your shadow whispering, "Wake up." The world didn't break you. It buried you under layers of performance, perfection, and politeness. Under pressure to be likable, not real. To be chosen instead of choosing yourself. But the shadow never dies. It waits. And when you're ready, truly ready, it shows you everything you tried to forget. Everything you are. Everything you could be. So here's your moment of reckoning. Not with the world, with yourself. Ask yourself, what have I buried to be accepted? Was it your voice? Your anger? Your truth? Your brilliance? Your boundaries? You don't need to stay buried. You don't need to stay quiet. That ache you feel isn't something broken. It's something sacred, trying to rise. Because you were never too emotional, never too loud, never too bold. You were just powerful, and they didn't know what to do with that. But now you do. The goddess inside you isn't lost. She's been waiting. And in the next part, we're going to talk about who she really is and why she was never meant to be nice. She was meant to be real. You were never meant to be polite all the time. That image they sold you, the perfectly groomed, always smiling, never offending woman, was a lie dressed up as virtue. Be nice. Don't be dramatic. Calm down. These are the chains they give you with a smile. But the truth is, you can't be real and be pleasing to everyone at the same time. You cannot awaken your power while staying quiet just to be liked. Because the goddess within you isn't here to make people comfortable. She's not here to be ornamental. She's here to be whole. In Jungian psychology, there's a reason the feminine psyche is represented in many forms, not just one. You carry within you the archetypes of the lover, the warrior, the healer, the mother, the witch, the queen, and more. These are not costumes you wear. These are inner dimensions of your being. The lover is sensual and alive, unashamed of desire. The warrior sets boundaries like sacred lines in the sand. The healer transforms pain into wisdom. The witch sees through illusions and speaks truth that rattles the room. You are not just one of these. You are all of them. And when you suppress any part to fit in, when you reject the warrior because she's too much, or hide the lover because she's too bold, you lose more than expression. You lose your center. It reminds me of a woman I knew who was constantly told she was intimidating. She was the kind of woman who spoke with conviction, walked with purpose, and didn't pretend to be smaller than she was. People called her aggressive, cold, hard to manage. They didn't see that she was exhausted not from being strong, but from always defending her right to exist as she was. For years, she apologized for her power, softened her edges, took up less space. But one day, she stopped asking permission. She stopped trying to be digestible, and the moment she did, something shifted. She didn't lose people, she lost the wrong one, and in their place came those who saw her, who respected her. Here's the second truth. Most people don't want to admit. Powerful women aren't liked. They're respected. And that respect, the kind that comes not from fear, but from authenticity, is worth far more than the temporary comfort of being approved by everyone. You see, niceness is often a strategy for survival. But realness is a strategy for freedom. Being real means saying no without guilt. It means showing up without shrinking. It means letting people misunderstand you rather than watering yourself down to be understood by everyone. Have you ever apologized for being too intense, too opinionated, too direct, too ambitious? What if that's not something to fix, but a signpost pointing toward who you're meant to be? What if your too much is the exact amount of truth this world needs from you? The divine feminine isn't always soft. Sometimes she's thunder. Sometimes she burns things down to rebuild them stronger. Sometimes she walks away from the table and builds her own. And you are not here to be liked by all. You're here to remember yourself. To stop making yourself small just to make others feel big. Being a goddess has nothing to do with perfection. It has everything to do with presence. With reclaiming the parts of you that were labeled too dangerous, too emotional, too loud, and recognizing them for what they truly are: sacred power. So stop chasing likability. Chase truth. Chase aliveness. Chase the version of yourself that no longer needs to apologize. Because the moment you stop performing and start embodying who you truly are, you become magnetic. Not because everyone approves, but because you finally do. And that's where it starts. That's where power begins. In the next part, we're going to talk about what happens when life forces you into the fire, and how that fire, rather than destroying you, might just be your initiation into becoming unshakable. There's a fire every woman walks through at some point in her life. Not a physical one, but something deeper. Invisible to the world, but soul-searing on the inside. Maybe yours was heartbreak. Maybe betrayal. Maybe the kind of silence that comes when no one sees your pain, when everyone around you assumes you're fine because you know how to keep smiling. But inside, something shattered. This is not the kind of story that gets shared on social media. This is the part of the journey no one applauds. The nights spent crying on the floor. The moments you question your worth. The hours when your reflection feels like a stranger. This is the descent, the place where the old version of you starts to die. And it has to, because before you can rise, something must burn. The forge that breaks you is the same one that tempers steel. We've all been sold the classic hero's journey. The one where a lone warrior slays the dragon, claims the treasure, and returns home triumphant. But the heroine's journey, your journey, is not about conquering some outside world. It's about walking straight into your own darkness and choosing not to run. The dragon you're meant to face is you, the version of you that made herself small to survive. The one that betrayed herself to be loved. The one who silenced her truth to avoid conflict. And the journey isn't linear. You don't just get over it and move on. You fall apart. You rebuild. You fall again. You learn to sit with grief, rage, fear, not to fix them, but to feel them. And in that brutal, beautiful process, you begin to remember. You remember that strength isn't about not breaking. It's about what you do after. You remember that softness and power can live in the same body. You remember that survival was never your final form. You were meant for more than just getting by. Carl Jung called this process individuation. the integration of your whole self. Not just the parts the world praises, but also the parts you've hidden, feared, or disowned. Individuation is not becoming someone new, it's becoming fully you. That means claiming your anger without shame. It means honoring your grief instead of rushing past it. It means owning your desires, even the ones you were taught to suppress. In a culture obsessed with quick fixes and clean narratives, this kind of transformation is radical. Because it's messy. It's not cute, but it's real. And here's the paradox: the moment you stop chasing approval and start living in truth, something shifts. Not only in how others see you, but in how you carry yourself. When you stop begging for approval and start living for truth, even your scars start to shine. There's a different kind of beauty in a woman who has faced her fire and stayed standing. Not because she avoided pain, but because she walked through it with open eyes and came out stronger, not in spite of her wounds, but because of them. She doesn't perform. She embodies. She doesn't please. She chooses. She doesn't seek validation. She radiates presence. This is not about perfection. This is about truth. The truth that you are allowed to feel rage and still be sacred. That you can grieve and still be powerful. That you can carry your past and still create a new future. And yes, there will be days when you forget all this. Days when the old voice returns, the one that says you're too much, too loud, too messy, too broken. But now, you know what that voice really is. It's the echo of a world that was never built to hold the fullness of your being. Let that world burn. Because in the ashes, something unshakable begins to grow. Not the version of you that always smiles and plays nice, but the version of you that knows her worth, speaks her truth, and no longer waits to be chosen. You are not on a path of becoming perfect. You are on a path of becoming whole. And the goddess within you, the real one, not the airbrushed idea, she rises through fire. Not untouched by pain, but forged by it. In the next part, we're going to talk about what happens when you stop shrinking to fit into the mold and start rising into the power that's always been yours. From the moment you were little, the messages were subtle but constant. Be quiet. Be polite. Don't be bossy. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Smile, even when you don't feel like it. Don't make anyone uncomfortable, especially not the men in the room. You were taught how to take up less space before you even understood what space was. And maybe, over time, you became a master of making yourself small. You held your opinions in meetings. You smoothed over conflict with a nervous laugh. You said yes when every cell in your body was screaming no. Not because you were weak, but because you were conditioned to believe that being agreeable was the price of being accepted. But here's the truth that changes everything. Your discomfort is often a sign that you're outgrowing your cage. That tightness in your chest when someone interrupts you and you just swallow it. That pit in your stomach when you say sure, but you mean absolutely not. That exhaustion after bending yourself into a version of nice that doesn't even feel like you anymore. That's not something wrong with you. That's your soul trying to expand past the limits that were placed on it. Let's make this real for a moment. There was a woman sharp, skilled, and quietly powerful. She worked in a corporate office where meetings were dominated by louder voices. Men repeated her ideas and got credit for them. She was constantly told she was so reliable, but rarely promoted. She nodded, smiled, and kept her head down. That's what she thought she had to do to be respected, until the day she didn't. One morning, someone interrupted her in the middle of presenting. This time, she didn't shrink. She paused. Then she said, calmly but clearly, "I wasn't finished." The room froze, but she didn't. From that moment on, everything changed. Not overnight, and not without resistance. But people began to listen. She started drawing boundaries. She stopped over-explaining herself. And the more she spoke up, the more she realized she had never been asking for too much. She had just been asking the wrong people. You see, reclaiming your space isn't about being rude. It's about being honest. And honesty, especially from a woman who refuses to apologize for her strength, is often the most radical act in the room. So how do you start? You start by saying no without writing a whole paragraph to justify it. You stop softening your truth just to protect someone else's comfort. You give yourself permission to be disliked if that's what it costs to be in integrity. You don't owe the world a version of yourself that keeps everyone else at ease but leaves you drained. Let's be clear. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-aware. Saying, "I'm not available for that," doesn't make you difficult. It makes you clear. Taking up space with your voice, your ideas, your presence, that's not arrogance. That's ownership. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. You might lose people. You might be called names. You might feel like the ground is shaking beneath you. But maybe that's because you're finally standing on your own foundation instead of one built to please others. So ask yourself, what if the only thing standing between you and freedom is your fear of being disliked? That fear is real, but it's not a reason to stay silent. It's a reason to rise louder. Because the truth is, not everyone will like you when you stop shrinking. But the people who matter are the ones who are aligned with your values, your truth, your fire. They won't just like you. They'll respect you. They'll meet you at your level. And most importantly, you will respect you. You're not here to be palatable. You're not here to be passive. You're here to be powerful. And power doesn't beg. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't wait for permission. It stands tall, it speaks clear, and it makes room where none was given. In the next part, we'll go deeper into what it means to be truly untouchable, not because you've hardened yourself, but because you've owned every part of who you are. There's a version of you that doesn't flinch, not because she's numb, not because she's cold, but because she's anchored, rooted so deeply in truth that no opinion, no rumor, no rejection can shake her. This is the untouchable state. And no, it's not arrogance. It's not about building walls or pushing people away. It's about knowing yourself so completely that manipulation has nowhere to land. It's about standing so firmly in your worth that validation becomes a bonus, not a requirement. Untouchable doesn't mean you're untouching. It means you're no longer grasping. Not for approval, not for permission, not for someone else to define your value. You become like stone in the storm, still, solid, unmoved by the chaos around you, not because it doesn't exist, but because it no longer dictates your direction. Carl Jung said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off the darkness, but by integrating it. When you can look at your own flaws and not flinch, when you can sit with your own fears and not flee, you become someone who is no longer easily controlled. And that's the fourth truth. You are no longer easy to control when you know who you are. When you've embraced both your light and your shadow, your kindness and your rage, your softness and your fire, you are no longer predictable, no longer pliable, no longer dependent on someone else's script. This kind of woman unnerves people who benefit from control, because she doesn't beg. She doesn't explain her boundaries away. She doesn't twist herself into something softer just to be accepted. And yet, she's not cruel. She's not cold. She's deeply human, but no longer bendable. Picture her. She walks into a room, and people feel it. Not her outfit, not her perfume, but her. There's something in her posture, something in her gaze. A calm, unwavering presence that doesn't need to prove anything. It's not loud, it's not performative, but it's undeniable. This is the energy of someone who has faced her pain, faced her shame, faced her silence, and reclaimed every inch of herself. She has been through the fire, not around it. She knows what it's like to fall apart, to question everything, to rebuild from nothing. And because of that, her strength is not an act. It's a lived truth. She has nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. And that makes her dangerous, not in a way that harms others, but in a way that dismantles every system that tried to keep her quiet. Because how do you control someone who no longer fears being misunderstood? How do you shame someone who has already made peace with their past? How do you silence someone who has reclaimed her voice from the wreckage? You don't. And that's the shift. When you stop outsourcing your identity and start living from your center, you become the kind of person who commands respect without needing to demand it. People may not always understand you. They may not always like you, but they'll feel you. And maybe most importantly, you'll feel you. You'll stop second-guessing yourself. You'll stop editing yourself mid-sentence. You'll stop shrinking around people who haven't done their own work. Because untouchable doesn't mean invulnerable. It means in possession of yourself. So here you are, no longer buried, no longer silent, no longer playing small. Now that you've remembered who you are, What will you do with it? You don't need permission to be who you already are. You don't need to ask for space or apologize for taking up room. You were never meant to wait for someone to save you, because the goddess in you, she doesn't wait. She remembers, she rises, and she writes her own myth. Everything you've been told to quiet, to question, to fix it was never broken. It was never too much. It was never wrong. It was you raw, real, powerful, and finally waking up to your full self. This world has enough noise. What it needs is your clarity. This world has enough performance. What it's starving for is your truth. So stop shrinking. Start rising. Speak the words you've been holding in your chest. Set the boundary. Choose yourself again and again, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence. Because here's what no one told you. You are not too much. You are exactly what this world needs. And you are not alone. There are millions of women still out there, trying to contort themselves into shapes that don't fit. Still making themselves small to be loved, to be chosen, to feel safe. Share this with someone who's still trying to shrink herself to fit. Leave a comment about the power you're reclaiming. And if you're ready to rise, subscribe. The journey's just beginning. You've remembered who you are. Now it's time to live like it.